Hi, guys, and welcome back to the PET Education Podcast, episode number 41. I'm a little bit excited about today. I'm always overexcitable.
You're always
Probably because I've had
overexcited
coffee.
anyway.
I'll get running away myself sometimes, mate.
Yeah.
But I'm excited because we've got a really great guest on. We all say great guest, don't we? But we have got a great guest on.
And this time we mean it.
This time we actually mean it. Unfortunately, we're not there in person, are we?
No.
So we're doing this via Zoom. Obviously, mine and Dan's technical skills are pretty shy, but we've managed to figure it out, mate, haven't we? But before I get carried away with who our guest is, how are you today, mate?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Had a good week this week. Looking forward to Christmas. I get a bit overexcited about Christmas. So looking forward to Christmas. Got some time off. Enjoying the World Cup. It's been a few awful games. England been involved in a couple. But I enjoy the World Cup. I enjoy the fact that last week or so football's been on all the time. Training's going well. That's about me, mate. What about you?
Yeah, again, I've enjoyed most of the football.
Enjoyed the football?
Yeah,
Been watching much of it?
Yeah, watch what I can, mate. Yeah, watch what I can. Head down with work. Quite busy with work at the moment, to be fair. Busy with study, busy with my course. Trying to get in the Christmas spirit as well. You know, actually did a bit of Christmas. I have no Christmas decorations for my flat.
Right.
So I thought I'd better go out and get some Christmas decorations.
What did you buy?
Oh, some tinsel. A little baby Santa. I was like, that'd be me. That's all I need, isn't it? So I did tell one of my clients, and she was disgusted with my lack of Christmas prep. So I'll get there bit by bit.
You'll get there.
I'll get there,
isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got to take your time and see what it's going to be.
Exactly. But anyway, less of our domestic stuff,
Yeah,
because that's going to bore the shit out of people, and back into the real world. So today, fortunate enough to have Johnny, the personal development coach, Johnny Lawrence. Thank you for coming on, mate.
Oh, mate, it's a pleasure. Really looking forward to this. We've had a bit of talk off camera or off air, whatever, and it's been a lot of fun already.
We'll have a giggle.
Yeah.
Get some more Christmas. Have you started Christmas decorating yet, Johnny?
I'm glad that I've got my headphones because my wife would hear that. And she's been on me about it already to get up in the loft, but I just haven't found the time yet. But we're going away this weekend, and I promised that when we get back on Sunday that we'll get the decorations down and get excited. So
you made a promise to your missus.
I did. I keep my promises, or I try to anyway.
Well done, mate. Well done. Johnny, for the people listening, I'm gonna sort of start with maybe a typical question, really, which is to just get the audience to kind of know a little bit about you, really. Just sort of talk a little bit about your journey up till now, and where you're currently at with your work and your career, if you don't mind sharing that.
Not at all. No, I mean, my name is Johnny Lawrence, and I'm sort of better known now as the self-development coach. And the reason that is for two reasons, really. And that's the education I've got, which is coming from all sorts of personal development courses, seminars, books, podcasts, spending time with knowledgeable people. So all of that's there. There's also quite a bit of experience as well. So the education and the experience, I believe, creates wisdom. But the experience doesn't just come from the coaching that I've done. It also comes from the unfortunate fact that I am a witness to domestic violence and a survivor of physical child abuse as a kid. And I spent a very long time of the early part of my life, 25 years, I'd say, believing that I was a weak and fearful person, which stopped me from moving forward. And then one day I caught the realization that I'm not weak. I'm not fearful. I was scared, but to be honest, you need to be scared before you can be brave. Otherwise, there's no bravery without first being fearful. So once I realized that, it changed the way I looked at things. And that's the essence of self-development. You can't change what's happened, but you can change the way you look at it. You can take something from being unhelpful to helpful. And so I started off in the fitness industry, and I realized now that really and honestly, I was a psychologist, coach, counselor, masquerading as a PT. And I think really that's what a lot of jobs are, you know, barman, for example, the amount of problems they solve on a day-to-day, and barbers, you know, listening to men. There's a great chap who's done a TED talk. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he ended up training as a counselor when he was a barber, because he had so many people coming in, and he had an experience where one of the people that he was talking to one day, he didn't spot the signs, and a few days later this chap committed suicide. So he decided to train to be a counselor so he could spot the signs and help. And I thought that was incredible. And I think that's a little bit of what we do when we meet people. as PTs or as coaches, when we meet them, they believe that they have a problem with the way they look, but actually, many times the way they look is actually a reflection of how they feel. So they say, like I said to you earlier, they say, "Oh, I'm unhappy because I'm overweight," but actually, maybe they're overweight because they're unhappy. And there's a difference. There's a difference. Therefore, there's a different way to treat that. So I learned a lot from the domestic violence. It gave me a set of skills that felt like a curse for a really long time. I suffered a lot with hypervigilance. I would sit in a pub, say, with my wife, and I would always sit with my back to the wall. I still do, to be honest. I don't like my back to a room. That's a trust thing. But I would sit in a room and I would hear the waitress over there dropping something. I would hear this couple having an argument. I'd hear this little kid over here crying. I'd hear the whole room, and it would overwhelm me. And that's because as a kid, I needed that hypervigilance to keep myself safe, to keep myself, protected. I'd have to look out for signs and cues, whether or not things were going to get violent at home. And I always looked at it as a bit of a curse. But part of my self-development has been to reframe things. So again, you can't change what's happened, but you can change the way you see it. And I reframed that hypervigilance. And now what it does is it allows me to see opportunities. It allows me to sit with clients. And when they're talking to me, I'm not just listening to the words they're saying. I'm listening to the way they're saying them. I'm listening to the pauses that they put in their conversations. I'm listening to the things they're not saying or they're hesitating to say, their body language, everything, and that is because of the hypervigilance. So therefore, I turned what felt like a curse into what now feels like a superpower. One of my close friends always calls it the spidey senses, and it's like, it's a nightmare. Only the other day, this is crazy. This experience, it makes me laugh. I was meeting up with a friend in a cafe, and she got talking to someone in the queue, and I overheard a bit of the conversation. And these two had happened to meet in a grief counselling space. My friend had lost her daughter, and the lady she was talking to had lost her husband, both to suicide. And I was talking to this lady, and the reason that I was with this friend is she's somebody who I had the pleasure of helping before. So I got talking to this lady in the queue, and we had a really great conversation, but I touched on a few things, and I noticed stuff, let's just say that, and I offered a different perspective. And anyway, the lady went on her way. I got a text message a few hours later saying, the lady that we were speaking to, she wants your number. She wants to speak to you. And I said, okay, fine. Yeah, fire away. And she rang me, and this lady had been struggling to move forward. I can't necessarily help with grief. I'm not qualified to do that. But at some point, when somebody's experiencing grief, they get to a point where they are accepting what's happened, and they just want to get excited about moving forward. Now, if there's something I know I can help with, it's helping people move forward. So we had an hour-long conversation, and it felt like a good conversation. It felt like a productive conversation. And then I put the phone down, and she said, "I'll be in touch." And I said, "Okay," because again, I don't believe, and I gather you two are the same. I don't do the hard sell or anything like that. If people want to work with you, they want to work with you, and that will happen organically. Anyway, I got a message from my friend saying, "I don't know what you said to them, but in the 3 years I've known them, I've never heard them speak this way. I'm really excited. Thank you." And it's that sort of experience that helps me realize that, and it's not an arrogance thing, I promise you. It just helps me realize that people like us, we have these talents, we have these skills that aren't conventional. They're not like, oh, you can go away and be an electrician or a plumber or an accountant or a lawyer or whatever. They're hard to articulate. They're hard to put into a little box, but they are there. That's how people like yourselves, people like me, can have someone come to you who's unhappy, and in a year's time, they are happy. And we don't necessarily take the credit for that, right? Because all we do is we support them. They're the driver of the car. We just sit in the passenger side encouraging them, and that's what we do as professionals, whether we're coaches, PTs, whatever, we're there to help them along. So I ended up deciding to go from being a PT to becoming a coach during the pandemic, because much as you probably experienced, we couldn't work with our clients one-to-one anymore. So I started doing accountability calls, and I didn't charge them because I felt really fraudulent. Like I wasn't in the gym with them doing anything. But the interesting thing was they lost more weight. The ones that wanted to lose weight, the ones that wanted to get fitter. And what I realized was sometimes as a PT, We don't mean it, but we take away accountability. And what happened in pandemic was they had no choice but to take accountability for themselves. It was up to them to do their workouts. It was up to them to follow their diets. It was up to them to drink enough water. It was up to them to sleep at the right times. They couldn't rely on anybody else. And all I did was had a call with them once a week and asked them how things were going, which taught me that I was a coach. So I ended up becoming a coach, and then one thing led to another. I ended up with a podcast, and I designed a program which came from working with people through lockdown. And now I no longer PT. I just coach people full time, and it's become what I would describe as a dream job. So there you go. That's it in a nutshell.
Johnny, incredible. I mean, thank you for sharing everything you sort of shared there. The whole thing. I mean, me and Dan were just busy writing notes the whole time we were hearing you speaking. So I'm sure we have a lot of different paths to sort of go down. I mean, first thing I could hear as you were talking there was the ability to reflect and understand yourself, truly understand who you are and understand your skills. And you've clearly been on a journey of understanding your past and how your past has influenced you, and using it in a real sort of positive way to impact your life and the people around you. And it's quite easy to go down another path with trauma and difficult situations in your past. And I'm really interested in how you've come to this place of being able to learn so much about yourself, but also how you've managed to use previous trauma in such kind of an empowering way.
I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes. That's the first thing I'll say. And I'm just going to think before I say this, if it's true. I think this is true. I wouldn't take any of them back. I suffered with addiction for quite a while. I wasn't an alcoholic, but I had a problematic relationship with drinking. And that was because not only was I not taught, but I was told I wasn't allowed to experience my emotions. So when I had very challenging and difficult emotions, I wanted to run away from them. I didn't want any part of them at all. Didn't feel good, get away from it as quick as I can. And alcohol helped with that. And alcohol, even that experience, I would, as much as I have many regrets around my time as a drinker, I wouldn't take them away, because what it showed me was that I had to find a way to cope. And that's what that did. You take away that alcohol, I don't know what would have happened. And that's the first thing I'll say to anybody that overeats or drinks too much or is really hard on themselves about something that they do, is you might look at that as a bad thing, but that's there to help you cope. And if you take away that thing, what then? What then? If that's what's helping you cope, then it might not be ideal, but right now it's what's helping. But at some point you might have to address that thing, because most of these coping mechanisms become something that becomes unhelpful. Alcohol became that for me. At some point I became obsessed with it. And all I wanted to do was drink, even at the sacrifice of my children, I hesitate to say. Like my wife would say, hey, should we have a beach day today? And I would think, where's the pubs around there so I could go and have beers and stuff, And quite often people say to me, I always say that my sobriety is the most important thing to me. And they say, is it more important than your family? And I say, unfortunately, yes, because I can't be with my family when I'm drinking, because all I think about is that. As I say, I wasn't an alcoholic. I wasn't drinking every day. But the way I was drinking at the weekends meant that when I wasn't working and I was supposed to be spending time with my family, all I was doing was trying to navigate myself towards drinking. So I learned a lot from my addiction. I'm happy to say just the other day, the 29th of November, I was 2 years sober. And I say that because the first year I completely forgot. I didn't celebrate it. And as we know, as trainers, coaches, that we must celebrate our wins, because by celebrating our wins, it allows us to recognize that we're going in the right direction, because nothing motivates us more than results. But if we don't acknowledge those results, how do we know to be motivated? So it's very important. Landmark dates like that, like anniversaries, they're very, very important to say, hey, you've done it, Johnny, well done, well done. Because that's another thing, as human beings, most of us aren't very good at being proud of ourselves. So we're taught in society that that's self-indulgent, that's selfish, that's egotistical, but it isn't. It's not selfish to think about yourself. You know, it's selfish to think about yourself too much. Maybe, if you're doing it at the neglect of others and you're causing other people harm or discomfort, or you're being unkind, that's something different. But when you guys are trying to educate people of how to look after themselves better, that's not selfish, And I think what people don't do sometimes is they don't create that circle that they protect, that they put the most important things in, which is themselves first, and then their kids, and then their partners or whatever, and then protect that thing. A lot of the time, I gather you'll work with women a lot as well, and the women have been mums, and they'll wake up in the morning and they'll plan to go to the gym at 10 o'clock, and then their kid's off sick, and the first thing to go is all the stuff for them, and they go and they look after their kid, and that sounds like the right thing to do. But what they never consider is the options. Well, how can I do this thing? Because nobody walks up to you in the street and gives you an answer to a question you didn't ask. So therefore, it's important to ask a question. So when you ask yourself a question, hey, how can I make this? How can I still make the gym today? Then you're never going to find the answer to that until you ask yourself that question. And I think there's a lot of people, a lot of women, a lot of men that they sack that off because that's what they've practiced. And what you practiced, you become very good at. So they've practiced neglecting themselves. They've become experts in neglecting themselves. So the first thing they do is they get rid of the gym. But actually, have they thought that they know that person behind reception well enough to bring the baby in the car seat who's asleep and leave them behind the desk? Most gyms, you know them well enough to do that. And most of them will look at them. You can probably still see the baby from here, and stuff like that. I've trained with women before that had to stop and breastfeed. It's just the way it goes sometimes in order for you to achieve your goals. But most people will lean towards neglecting themselves first. So I wouldn't take back any of the things I've learned, even though a lot of the time I'm that guy. Unfortunately, I have to touch the flame to realize what hot means.
Yeah.
That's who I am.
It's a really important point as well. You mentioned there, just reflecting on how far you've come, and it's one of the things I try and do with clients a lot because they really miss that. They're always looking at the next thing and the next thing and setting these new goals, but they never just take the moment to just take a step back and go, actually, whatever the goal is for the last couple of years, I've made some really good progress here. And actually take that time just to give yourself a pat on the back and know you are progressing, you are doing well. And like you say, it's not a self-indulgent thing. It's just the reality of what you've done so far. Rather than, because if you're always just looking at the next thing and the next thing, when do you actually just take time to take stock and really make sure that you revel in your achievements and your accomplishments, which then breed competence and hopefully confidence as well, right?
Yeah, well, that's where limiting beliefs are born, because we focus on all the things that we're not good at or we believe we're not good at, never collecting the evidence to support the other, So if you're not reflecting and thinking on yourself, oh, how well have I done? Then you're not collecting the evidence for when that inevitable imposter syndrome comes up, because it's like self-sabotage, right? How many times do you hear that? Self-sabotage. I self-sabotage. I take a different view on self-sabotage because I look at it like this. Somebody spends a very long time, and I'm going to use language that they use for me. I'm not being unkind, but they'll say, I'm the fat person, right? So I'm fat. That's what they'll say. And they've been fat for a really long time in their eyes. They know how to be fat. They've always been fat. They put up with all of the stuff that comes with that, all of the difficulties and the challenges and stuff. But then they come to some chaps like you, right? And they start to lose weight. They don't know how to be the thin person. And everything in their life is now different. Their relationship with food is different. Their relationship with sleep is different. Their relationship with hydration is different. They even have to buy new clothes. Everything is different. And guess what that does? It makes them feel uncomfortable. And sometimes the difficult thing to realize is that even though you don't want something, if it's familiar, it will offer you comfort. If it's familiar, it will offer you comfort. So you will navigate back towards that familiarity. Now, people will call that self-sabotage. They will start eating again and putting weight on, and they'll start to feel more comfortable because once again, they know how to be the fat person, right? They don't know how to be the thin person. They can't even stand the compliments they're getting because they're not used to it. It's overwhelming. But people call that self-sabotage. I think that sounds a lot like self-soothing. I think it's actually them giving themselves what they need in that time, which is to feel comfortable again, because they're in this body they don't recognize and people are treating them differently and everything feels different and it's overwhelming. Therefore, they just go back towards the old behavior. But by acknowledging that you're making changes, at the same time, you can sit there and say, how does it feel? Let's talk about that. Because the first step to helpful change in your life is awareness. If you are aware of something, therefore you can do something about it. Sometimes just being aware is enough to make a change. You know, there are stages that come after that, but awareness is key. If we don't know what it is, if we don't have clarity, because that's another thing as well, someone might come into you and say, I want to lose weight. Well, technically, if they lose a pound, they've done it, right? But that's not what they mean. That's not what they mean. That's why it's so important to be clear about what our goals are. And it's even more important to recognize when you get there, because if you're not clear about your goals, how will you know when you get there? You won't. So therefore, you will constantly feel like you're failing, which is not helpful.
There's been so many amazing points, Johnny, you brought up already. I'm going to try and see if I can connect a few dots just for the next part, because we've talked about, well, you've talked about perceptions and reframing, which I think is really powerful. You're chatting about kind of coping mechanisms, and I see that's quite similar to defense mechanisms and helpful or unhelpful or adaptive and maladaptive sort of stuff. So we've got that. And also we've got kind of getting to the root of stuff as well, kind of what I'm hearing as well. And kind of when we're trying to get people to change in some shape or form, whether you're working in self-development, personal training, you're trying to push people forward. They're trying to grow and develop and change behaviors and develop themselves. And trying to connect some dots here, if I can, probably won't do a very good job, is trying to think a lot about the root of stuff. We're pushing forward, but maybe thinking about what got someone to that position in the first place, and bringing it back to what you were talking about earlier about people not being in a good place mentally, emotionally. You also reflected on your upbringing, your past, and understanding that. Do you think this lack of understanding of your past, what got you to be in this position in the first place, and really understanding the problem, sometimes actually causes people to get to a blocker? Because they might get some surface level change, they might even lose a bit of weight, but to really get to the root cause of how they feel about themselves, what's going on mentally and emotionally. Do you think people need to go a bit deeper sometimes to really see this kind of long-term change and understand their coping mechanisms, and to ultimately get a better long-term result, is what I'm trying to say?
This is my opinion, so I don't know whether you'll find this in a book or not. I don't know, but in my experience, the most important thing to address, if you really want that change to stay, is your value system, your values and beliefs. And what that means is them long-standing things that indicate to you what you believe to be true and what you believe to be right and what you believe to be wrong. If we can establish what they are, if we can create awareness around those things, then those things will always be true to you. Now, a couple of things with that. Values are your foundation. But most of us get our values from our caregivers or parents. What can sometimes happen, though, is that our parents will pass down to us their preferences disguised as values. So then we grew up thinking, I don't know, for example, I like a tidy home, but our home is never tidy. So we spend all our time feeling really bad and really useless and really crap about not having a tidy home, even though our values are to be tidy, not realizing that our values aren't to be tidy. They're our parents' preferences that we think are our values. So if you take that and you apply something more serious to that, it's really, really easy to see how you can spend a whole lifetime in conflict with yourself, you know. And again, conflict can sometimes be mistaken to as an issue, you know. So you think you've got this problem, but actually it's your conflict with that problem. You feel one way, but are doing something different. Or you think you feel some way, but you're doing something different. And it's about really understanding, what do I value? You know, whenever I do value sessions with people, they will always tell me what they think I want to hear. So I value honesty. I value integrity. I'm sure you do. But what do you really value? I want to be rich. Great. Now we're getting somewhere. You know, because people, again, they're guilted into thinking they're not allowed to say that, right? Yeah. You know, because we exist in 3 states at all times. And this is, again, another belief of mine. This is something that I don't think you'll find in a book. It's just something that I've decided that makes sense to me. And then 3 stages, then 3 states to this. There's the person that you want to be. And that is something that's based off of your values. So you're trying to be somebody that's successful, and successful is defined by whatever you think it is, right? So there's the person you want to be. Then there's the person that you believe others want you to be. we all play a role in life. So we might be a husband, we might be a father, we might be an employee or an employer. And all of those things come with expectations. They are a role that we play. And we play those roles for those people, right? And then there's the last one. And this is the one that gets neglected most often. The person you really are. I want to be this person that cares about this, but I don't care about this. Matter of fact, today I just wanted to do one, but because we want to be this person, we deny that in the other part of ourselves. That, in my opinion, is a large percentage of where depression is born, because we are not giving ourselves what we really want. We're trying to give ourselves what we think we want or what other people think we want, and we neglect the person we actually are. It's okay if you just want to go and get drunk. That's okay, as long as you don't have an issue with alcohol. But people feel like they can't do that, and then this person, this part of you that is usually attached to some sort of inner child, some kid that's been practicing for a long time to be neglected, or has been neglected, or has aspects of neglect. And then all you do is take over that role. This is how I was treated, so this is how I'm comfortable being treated, so this is how I'm going to treat myself. And then that's when you end up in that place, so one of the first things I do with all my clients is I go back to their values. And it's hilarious to me sometimes, because even though people want to change something about themselves, they will still, and I'm sure you've seen this, they will aggressively defend it anyway. You'll say to them, there's this change I need you to make. Oh, I can't do that. And they'll give you 100 reasons why they can't do it. All of them are nonsense, because they can, but they're defending it because it causes them anxiety. The thought of this thing that they can't do anymore that they've always done. But I eat chocolate every night. Well, not anymore. I can't do that. You can do that. You don't want to. And that's fine. You're allowed to feel like that too, but you're still going to do it, right? There's hundreds of things in everybody's day that they don't want to do that they've got to do. Most of the time, people don't want to go to work, right? But they've got to. So they get up and they do it. And that's the other part of it too. People think that when you decide you're going to go on a journey of any kind, weight loss, self-development, whatever it is, they want to feel this feeling of motivation, and they misunderstand what that means. So they say, oh, I want to feel motivated, which in their mind means skipping out of bed, happy to do it all, excited to do it all. Nah, I go to the gym, right? Some days I don't want to go. Some days I don't want to go. I just don't. I'm too busy. And for some reason, I have to do it at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I'm up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I want to kick the dog and all these different. I don't kick the dog. Let me make that clear. but I want to. It's like, whoa. Mark for edit. but like, I make myself do it. And do you know what that is? That's not motivation. That's discipline. And not many people want to hear that, because that's not very much fun, is it? I'm going to have to go to the gym. But I can tell you one thing for sure. I think this is true. I don't think I've ever gone to the gym and regretted it. I really don't.
Actually, that's a really point. One of my clients says the way she talks herself in is she's like, if you go and if you're not enjoying it that much, just leave. She never leaves. She always will.
That's fantastic. That's really great management, isn't it?
Yeah. Just a nice way of saying. So I just want to take you back, Johnny, because I like, you're saying about people giving you, when you ask them what their values are, and them just giving you, I suppose, society's expectations of what maybe values should be or passing on. How do you is that a difficult conversation sometimes for people to really get in and really truly find what their values are and get below that surface level, just reactionary, this is what I think my values should be, and really find what their values are as an individual? Is that a tough, or is that a process that you've had to go through with a lot of people?
It's concerning to me that most of the time when I ask people what their values are, they don't know what they are, or they believe them to be something that they're not. So what I've discovered is the best way to discover someone's values is to have a conversation with them. Just have a conversation and listen for their values. Listen for their values through conversation, because they're telling you all the time what they value. They're always telling you. You might say to somebody, what's one of the best achievements that you've ever had? And they go, I won this race, and it felt really good to run this race, and I really, really loved the medal I got at the end. Oh, so you value achievement. Great. So they value achievements. I can use that as a coach. Tell you what, if you do this, that will mean that you've done this for 100 days. Oh, that's interesting. So now you've got a streak, all of a sudden they want to protect the street because it means something, you know. So with the values, we can use them as coaches as well. We can use them to help people, to motivate them, to give them a reason to do something, you know. So that can be really valuable. Like you say, though, if you ask someone their values, they most likely won't know, or they'll give you a misinterpretation of what they believe is their values, someone else's preferences, most likely. And that can happen later in life too. You know, this sounds bad saying it this way, but it's just been my experience. But I've noticed when I've worked with a lot of like women, they take on the values of their husband, because the husband is maybe, I don't know, the main breadwinner in the house potentially, you know. So they've got this submissive way of looking at them, so they then take on their values and they start to believe this and believe that, but they don't believe it, and that challenges their understanding of themselves, which is a hard place to be in. It's really difficult when you start challenging what's real and what's not with somebody. That's scary. That's really scary, you know. But if you can just sit with it and work your way through it, then you'll be okay. But yeah, as you say, finding out values is about conversation and listening. And the more you practice that listening, the better at it you become, you know.
Yeah, something we talk a lot about on our seminar is we have it 2 parts. The first part is Dan does a lot of the mechanics, exercise stuff, and I do a lot more of the communication side. And the first part is developing the skill of active listening and actually telling people this is a skill that needs to be developed over time, one that I was very poor at when I was younger, and now I'm just a little bit better at, but I'm trying to get better at it each day. But going back to the values side of things, I think it's something that needs navigating over time. Something that, you know, when I'm mentoring other coaches, I start with values straight away. Let's start trying to navigate that. And like you're saying there, Johnny, I think it's quite hard for people to give a kind of authentic answer straight away. At first, the answer is quite surface level. It's what I said, they answer the question and what they think you want to hear, as you said earlier. So I think it's realizing that people sometimes are acting in line with their values and don't realize it, which is kind of what you're saying there. But also drawing them out of a conversation or asking people the right questions. Sometimes I've used questions like, what was an example I can think of? Like, when was a time in your life when you felt the best? And they describe all the stuff that's gone on in their life. And essentially, that's when life was more in line with their values. The reverse is, when were you suffering the most? And actually, that's where some of these high value things were taken away, and allowing people to see that and then realize that, okay, living life according to your values isn't necessarily an easy life, isn't a life you're always going to feel motivated for, but it's incredibly fucking fulfilling when you do.
That's the thing. Sometimes when you live in line with your values, it might challenge somebody else's. So therefore, one of you might need to adapt your values, and that's okay. You can adapt your values as long as you know that's what you're doing. You know that I generally wouldn't do this, but on this occasion I'm going to, as long as no one's being seriously hurt or anyone's being unkind to anybody, then maybe you might do something, and at worst you might find it boring. Fine, that's okay, you know. But the other part to it is to remember that values can change. I know, as the 3 of us sit here, that, you know, I'm going to take a stab in the dark that none of us are 20 years old.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not. Like, you know, but you know, I know that we could all speak to the fact that we do not hold the same value system we did as when we were 20, and thank God. You know, but the way I see it is, it's like we are the hardware, just like this phone, right? So this phone is the hardware, and on this phone it runs a software. So that's much like us. We are the hardware. The software is our value and belief system. Now, if this thing asked you to update it and you don't do it, it's not long, maybe a week, before things stop working. You know, the phone keeps turning itself off and on. Apps don't load up properly. Things become slower. And it's because it's nurturing you. It's encouraging you to do the update, to do the update, to do the update. And that's what happens with our values. As things happen, as people come into our lives, as we take on job roles, as we make different friends and all these different things, our values get nudged to change, but we don't change them. So therefore, we gradually become out of alignment over time, and we don't notice it until all of a sudden we're really unhappy and we don't know why. And it's because over time, we've been slowly nudged and nurtured towards our values being changed, but we haven't done it. We haven't sat there and done the update, you know? And sometimes it might mean that I don't know, I can't think of an example now, but when we were younger, we might have valued staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning. And here we are as a 43-year-old still staying up to 3 o'clock in the morning. And we're like, wait, this isn't working for me anymore. But we don't change it because it's something we believe we value. I mean, that's a very crude and unhelpful example, but you get my point, hopefully. But yeah, I think it's about recognizing that sometimes our values change, and that's all right. What I find is they usually change around the O birthdays. So everybody freaks out. Oh my God, I'm turning 30. Oh my God, I'm turning 40 or 50. And the reason they freak out is because we never feel like grown-ups, right? Just one day we're treated like one and we're like, wait, am I actually a grown-up now? Wow. I mean, I didn't sign up for that. No, I don't remember signing up for that.
So true.
Yeah. But we are grown-ups. Yeah, and most blokes don't behave like grown-ups.
Don't always at my age, Johnny, that's for sure.
Well,
No.
Like clubs, it's like when I first turned 18, it's like 22. I was like, how is everyone of every age not out clubbing till 3 a.m? It's the best thing ever. Now I'm 33. I think I can't be asked. I like to be in bed by like 10, half 10. And you didn't see that change happening, do you? But you say your values, your beliefs, the things you enjoy doing, they change over a period of time. It's only when you look back, you think, I couldn't do that. It was enjoyable at the time, but I certainly couldn't do it now.
There's loads of that, isn't there? There's loads of that when we were younger, you know, that what we did say for now. And if I had a dream about it now, I'd wake up hungover, I reckon. You know, but it's like, I remember when we've had our first son, and I remember they were like, right, you could take him home. And I'm like, are you sure? You want me to, you're going to give him to me? Like, no, like, I don't think this is a good idea. You know, because I didn't feel like I was ready, but the truth is you're never ready. You know, you're never really ready for them big, important jobs because they're so important to you, you know, that you don't want to get it wrong. And you can't get it wrong to a degree, you know, but it's like you're in charge of this other human being. That's big time. You know, if you really think about it, you wouldn't do it. You just wouldn't. It's like, I don't think I'm ready for that. It's madness. But you are, and you will, and you'll learn, you know, and your values will change, and you'll realize that, you know, you might drink till 12 o'clock in the morning and you'll wake up with a hangover. With children, you won't do that for very long because the kids don't care. they will still say dad, 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 dad in the morning, and your head will be pounding and all them things, and you'll learn and you'll adjust, or you won't and you'll be unhappy, you know. So it's about listening to those cues that life's given you, because it's always giving you cues. Some of them are super obvious once you've realized them.
Probably one of the biggest challenges in life is taking care of a child when you're hungover. I've had a few times with my daughter, and I was like, "Oh, this is really painful." So yeah, you learn the hard way, Johnny. But like you were saying earlier about talking about wisdom, weren't you, at the beginning of the podcast, and talking about kind of experience and knowledge together. And I think you kind of make a really good point there. I think that's how we do develop wisdom. Is it's not just done through years on the planet, it's done through learning as well along the way, and part of learning is to reflect and maybe do some added education around personal development or psychology or whatever, so you grow and develop, and you use your years on the planet together, and that's how you develop wisdom. It's not just something that's just given to you because you reach a certain age.
Yeah, and I think what people can understand the concept of reflecting on their mistakes. They can look at the mistake and go, that was a mistake. And at some point when they're ready, when the anger's dissipated, when all of the shame or whatever happened, when all the unhelpful feelings have gone away, and they can look back and they can reflect, how did it go wrong? What could I do differently? But what people aren't so practiced at is looking at what went right. Because there's so much learning from what went right. What went right? Why did it go right? How can I repeat that? How can I do it better? All of these things are so valuable, because if you're doing it right, that's brilliant. First of all, acknowledge it, which people don't do. We've already spoken about that. They don't acknowledge their wins in life. But not only that, they don't reflect on them, and they don't think, how can I do it better? How can I improve on it? And they just sort of stay the same, or they call it luck. Very rarely is it luck. You know, you did it because you're good at it, you know, and you could be better at it if you took the time to reflect. So we're good at recognizing where we went wrong. We always practice that, you know, and that's, I use that word practice quite a bit, because I think that when you treat everything as a practice, you remove that expectation of perfection, because we go to the gym and we practice, right? We might want to hit a lift or whatever, but it's generally sat in that practice area. If we don't hit it, we're frustrated, but it's not the end of the world. You know, but when people treat everything as an opportunity to be perfect, that's how, when you're on a diet and you have a moment lapse in your diet, and then you sack it all off. because you've broken that now. That's not what, that's not it. It's just practice. You know, let's not get too hard on ourselves. Let's not be unkind to ourselves. Let's just accept that we had a moment where we really wanted chocolate. It's done now. Let's move on. You know, it was just a practice. It just takes away all that guilt and all that shame and all that horribleness that a lot of people are really good at. They practice being unkind to themselves. They practice bullying themselves and being cruel and saying horrible things to themselves. And as I say, what you practice, you'll get really good at. So practice the things that you want, not the things you don't want.
I think as I'm listening to you talk there, I kind of have this metaphor in my head that I use sometimes of kind of climbing a mountain. And we're talking a lot about growth and looking maybe further up the mountain, but it's important to see how far up you've come up your own mountain, not all look at other people's mountains and where they're at. What have I overcome? What have I managed to achieve? What obstacles have I managed to overcome? I don't think we spend enough time reflecting on that, whether it's difficult things we've been through in our past, maybe it is types of trauma, things we've learned, how we've developed, to really spend some time on that is really important for personal growth. And that level of awareness actually allows you to make better decisions up the next part of the mountain, to go, well, hang on, I've learned from this path. Maybe this path's a little bit better for me because I was going down this other path before. Actually, that isn't the right path for me because, as you said, values have changed. I'm a different person. So I can use this path to learn and develop and choose the right path for me on my own mountain, not to sort of think about other people's mountains and comparisons as well there.
Well, sometimes the only way to know which direction to come is from reflecting from what you've done. You know, that reflection informs the next stage. The way I look at self-development is it's much like a stairway, right? I put a post up about this the other day, where if you think about it as a stairs, right? When you're all on the ground floor, you can all see the same thing. Yeah, you can all go, look over there, there's a tree, and you can all see the tree, right? So we all agree it's a tree, we all feel good about that. And you go up the next step and you can see a little bit more than the other people, not a lot, just a little bit. And you can still say, oh, the tree looks a bit different from here, but still a tree, right? At some point, you're going to get so high up that stairway that what you can see and they can't, they've got no way of understanding it. You can see so much. I can see mountains. What's a mountain? I can see waterfalls. What's a waterfall? You know, they can't see that. They've got no way of understanding it, but you do. And what people then do is they then focus on the people at the bottom, wishing for them to be up there with them. But instead of turning around and going, hey, I'm Johnny, what's your name? And making friends with people. And what happens is as we move along a journey, and this can happen a lot too, is our friendship group unintentionally nudge us towards going back to our previous self. They treat us like we used to be, which cues us to be like that. You know, so for example, as lads, we might, you know, I might put on a bit of weight and I might say to myself, right, I'm gonna go on a diet, I'm gonna train, I'm gonna come see you chaps, and I'm gonna go and get in shape, right? And then I might say to you, hey, listen, lads, I've got to go out on Friday. We're going out for pizza and drinks. And you say, okay, well, let's talk about that, right? What are we going to do about it? Maybe you do this, take this strategy with the drinks. Maybe you take that with the pizza. And then you go out with your lads, you've got a plan. And all they do is take the piss out of you and they mug you off and they make you feel bad. And you've got two choices then. You either affirm it and go, I don't care what you think. And you order the pizza with a big hole in, you know, and you have an occasional non-alcoholic drink in between or whatever, or you cave. Now, in essence, your friends have just bullied you into becoming the person you used to be, but you let them. You know, and they didn't do it on purpose.
Your old self. It goes back to what you were saying earlier, Johnny, doesn't it? About kind of your identity starts to change, but then you go back to those old habits and behaviours because that's who you deep down still see yourself as that person. And then if you're in that environment of those people and they're mugging you off, well, that's it. I'm not having them take the piss out of me. Right, I'm gonna have
yeah. I'll show you.
I'll do 10 points. Come on, it's easy to go down that path, isn't it? And it does take a lot of awareness, but also courage and strength to maybe make those right decisions based upon your values, which is difficult.
Well, the truth is, when you get to where you want to be, they might not be the friends for you anymore. That's hard. That's hard. That's a hard place to sit, man. All your friends want to do, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not a judgy person, right? But all your friendship group want to do is go out and get drunk, for example, and you don't want to do that anymore, and you're unhappy in that environment. But if I don't do it, then I won't be spending time with them anymore. Might be spending time with the other people instead. Because I guarantee you on your journey, you've met people that you do want to be around more, and that's what I'm talking about. When you get to that step that's so high that the people at the bottom have stayed on the ground floor, when instead of looking at them and saying, hey, why don't you come up here with me, turn around and have a look who's around you and make friends with them, because they're more in alignment with who you are. As a coach, when I coach people, my assumption is that if we've been successful in session 1, I'm talking to the person that's in front of me. Session 2, they're a different person. There's a saying, I think it's no person steps in the same river twice, because it's never the same person and it's never the same river. So if I treat a person in session 2 like I did in session 1, I'm cueing them to be the same instead of different. They've developed themselves since that last session. So now I need to get to know the new person. So what's wonderful is every time I work with someone, I'm re-meeting someone every single time. They're similar, but they're different, because they're starting to believe that they're this different person. And I'm validating that by treating them differently. Oh, well, you know that now. So I'm validating that for you. If I treat you like you used to be, well, I thought you like this. Yeah, well, I don't. That's the whole point. I'm here to change, but yeah, I'm treating you like you used to be. It doesn't make sense, But what people do as well is like that comparison thing you mentioned just now. You're talking about comparison. People spend so much time looking at other people, and what are they doing? They're reflecting. What if they just took that opportunity to reflect on themselves instead of looking at other people? So they look at other people, and they, first of all, they judge someone else on the way they feel, right? So they judge their inside on someone else's outside. So you wake up in the morning, you feel horrible about yourself. You're hungover, you're rubbish, you failed at something yesterday, blah, 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 blah. You're not feeling good about yourself. And then on the school run, there he is. Chap over there has got the nice car. He gets out, he's all suited and booted. He's perfect. He's perfect. He's perfect, and I'm not. Yeah. What you don't know is what's going on in his head.
Yeah.
You don't know. You know how you feel. You don't know how he feels. He could have just lost somebody. He could have been ill. He could have had really bad, stressful day at work, whatever. But yet you look at him and you see all these superficial things, and you're making your judgments on that. And the other part of it as well is that when you're scrolling down social media and somebody triggers you, right? They've got more followers than you.
Don't do that, mate. I'll never get triggered, mate. Come.
I believe you.
Every single week. That's why we have an hour chatting together.
That's all this is. Yeah.
Podcast on, mate. We have to rant at each other for half an hour. That triggers that we've had, just get off our chest.
It's the most triggering place in the world, social media, because everybody. I can tell you something for nothing, right? I have never had a massive row with my wife and then said, "Wait, selfie." I'm going to upload that on Instagram, and it's like, doesn't make sense. We put the best bits up, right? But the only really, when you look at a post and it triggers you, you can get cross about it, right? You can get angry about it, you can get really annoyed about it, or you can realize something. You've just been that's aspiration. It's not animosity, it's aspiration. You've just looked at something, and now you know there's something in that you want. What is it? Now make it a goal. Because if they've got it, so can you. But instead, we choose to get annoyed about it. We choose to try and tear that person down. You building yourself up doesn't mean you have to tear someone else down. That's not what that means, man. Just realize that they're doing well. Great. I'm happy for them. First of all, you don't know how they really feel. All you know is how they feel, or how it looks like they feel on social. But really, if you want to compare yourself to the person you was yesterday. And that doesn't mean that you need to be a millionaire overnight. What it means is, do you know what? I've drunk all the water I said I was going to drink today. Win. As somebody who's sober, right? I make this pact with myself. I can have the crappiest day ever. I can piss everybody off. I can fail at everything. I can do everything wrong, and it can be the crappiest day under the sun. But if I don't drink alcohol, I still win. Simple, So, and that's the way I try to look at it, So I just take it one day at a time. All I've got to do is get through today, not drink, and then go wake up tomorrow, do it again. And I think anyone could take that approach. Anyone could take that approach. Is it easy? No, it's not. It's not easy. Some days it's super easy, and I don't think about it. Other days it's harder. I get told bad news. I get told good news. Whatever. It makes me think, I could really do with some wine right now. Not going to do it though. What I'm not going to do is pretend I don't want wine.
Yeah.
I'm going to acknowledge it, and I'm going to sit with it. I have this thing that I call the ABC method, right? So when I experienced what I used to believe I would get cravings. Now, let's stop a minute, right? Are you telling me that this glass bottle with wine in has got that much power over me? Can't. It's just an object. It can't have power. I give it power. Why am I giving it power? What's going on there? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit with this, what I think is a craving. It's not a craving. It's a reaction. I'm feeling an uncomfortable emotion, and my reaction to that is to avoid it with alcohol. So, okay, what's the emotion? Oh, I'm feeling resentment. Cool. I'm feeling resentment. So I'm going to sit with that resentment for a bit, and I'm going to breathe. I'm going to do box breathing. I'm going to breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. And I'm going to get through it, because what science is showing us is that it takes 90 seconds for an emotion to dissipate, not go away, dissipate, right? So it's like a gut punch. If I punch someone in the gut, it's going to hurt. It's not. It feels like it's going to hurt forever, but it doesn't, right? But there are 4 things that can happen when we have an emotion that can keep us in that emotion, right? We can attach to it and identify to it. So we become the emotion. We can think about it. We can think ourselves we can think a feeling into a problem, right? We can avoid it, or we can judge it. As soon as we judge it and we start creating all this uncomfortable stuff around it, the way to avoid that is just to breathe and do none of those things. And then when you get to the end, you have to communicate. So the ABC is accept, breathe, communicate. And the communication can go 2 ways. It can go to yourself. That was not a craving. That was a reaction to resentment, but I'm past it now. And you'll practice that and you'll get better at it. Or the communication might be, listen, wife, you said this to me and it really annoyed me. You might want to take it easy on that one. but at some point, you might want to communicate what's going on in order to move past it. But yeah, that comparison thing can be a real trap. And you can waste a lot of energy and cause a lot of uncomfortable feelings around that too. But it's understanding those emotions. And the thing about emotions is that, especially as blokes, we might lean into anger, right? We might even identify with anger, say things like, I'm an angry person, or I'm angry. We're not, we're experiencing anger. But the anger is not an emotion. It's a reaction to an emotion. What are you angry about? I'm angry because I feel resentful, right? Anger, you can't do anything about that. All you can do is wait for someone to not be angry. You can't just say something like, oh, I'm not angry anymore. I've never seen that. You just have to wait for him to not be angry anymore, right? But if you're experiencing resentment, well, you can look into that. You can ask questions. You can try and get your head around it. What was making me feel resentful? Well, it was when they did this, this, and this. Oh, okay, well, can you do anything about that? Not really. Right. Well, you might need to accept it then. Yeah. Because acceptance is hard, right? I had to accept my childhood trauma. Hard. Doesn't mean I forgive anybody. Doesn't mean I like it. It just means I accepted it. And the great thing about acceptance is that people say they wrestle with acceptance, or they're trying to accept, or I'm really working on it. Well, there's your problem. Because acceptance is not a doing word. It has no energy attached to it. It's just whatever it is, you just have to accept it. And some days you're allowed to unaccept it and go, I hate that person. That's fine. But as long as you re-accept it at some point, you're all right,
I think acceptance is something that in certain cases can be like a journey, can't it? And sometimes you think you've accepted it, whether it's things like grief or trauma, things that have happened, things that have happened in my past. But I think I've accepted it, and suddenly I'm quite emotional about it. I'm like, I haven't accepted it as much as I might thought that I would have done. But kind of that emotional intelligence piece that you're talking about there, Johnny, I just see that as a real game changer for like your relationships, for your actions and your behaviors. I know when I was younger, I probably had 0 emotional intelligence. And now, like I said, it's just a little bit better than 0. But
0.5.
Yeah, exactly. It's something I'm working hard on becoming better with. And the more I study emotions, the more I learn about myself, is to realize we have better relationships with some emotions than others, maybe based upon our past, what emotions we were told that we could express healthily, what emotions we struggled with. There's helpful reactions to emotions and there's unhelpful reactions to emotions, constructive or unconstructive, and ways to be able to express, maybe verbalize our emotions. We all feel better when we spoke to someone about how we're feeling. But as men, as 3 men talking now, I know that I can say it's something I've struggled with. Being vulnerable enough to open up about how I'm feeling, for starters, has been really difficult. and to sometimes acknowledge that I actually have emotions. First of all, to be fair, I think I've got like a military background, so it's kind of like, well, we don't have emotions here. We have aggression and anger. That's about it, mate. You don't have any others. You're weak if you have any other emotions. You don't feel sadness. You don't feel anxiety. You don't have these emotions. So for me, it's a journey that I'm still on, but learning more about it, getting a bit more wisdom as I've got older, I see it as just a real game changer, if I'm honest, for myself and my clients.
Well, it's interesting because that's a great example of conflict. So you tell yourself, but you can't or don't have these emotions, but you are having these emotions. So you're lying to yourself, which is causing conflict. I'm not saying that's what you're doing. I'm saying that's what can happen.
I used to lie to myself all the time, mate. Stop
Yeah.
Keep myself really good looking.
Yeah, but that's the problem I have with affirmations. I don't necessarily have a problem with that as a principle, but if you tell someone to go and lie to themselves in the mirror every morning, all they're doing is building distrust.
Yeah.
So they're going in the mirror going, you are this, you are that. If you don't believe that, then you're just lying to yourself. A better way to do it is to reframe it and attach the work and the effort to it. I am not good at this yet, but I will be because I'm going to practice and I'm going to research and I'm going to do all these things. You're attaching the effort to it because things don't just happen. You don't just wake up and know something. You have to go and learn it. You have to do some work. You don't just wake up with a six pack. You have to work for it, and the work has to be part of the plan. But if you keep looking in the mirror and telling yourself things that aren't true, then that's all you're doing. That's all you're doing. And I think that's an important point you make about emotions and understanding. And I really respect that because it's difficult. I spoke to a client a little while ago and he gave me the best example I've ever heard, right, about why men don't talk. And he said, my wife, she does the shopping. This is what he told me. He said, my wife does the shopping, right? And 5 minutes before she comes home, she'll give me a call. And she'll say, got some heavy bags in the boot, be ready to come and get them. And he said, he'll be there with the kids and then they'll open the door and the kids will run out and they'll pick up all the little bags because they'll leave the heavy bags for him. And he takes the heavy bags because he doesn't want them to experience how heavy they are. He doesn't want the bag handles to cut into their hands because they're too heavy for them. He knows what that feels like and he doesn't want to pass it on to them. And that's what happens with men. Like there are this might be controversial, stand by, but there are a lot of people out there that have a lot of opinions about men. But interestingly enough, a lot of them aren't men. And it's difficult. There's a lot of expectations of men. There's a lot of expectations of women, but a lot of men take the opportunity to learn about them expectations for women. A lot of women don't take the chance to listen to the expectations of men. We get told we should do this, we should do that. I think it's Chris Rock. He said that the only thing that's loved unconditionally is women, children, and dogs.
Yeah.
He said every bit of love that's passed on to a man comes with an expectation.
Yeah.
I used to do a female barbell club a little while ago, and one of them was out on a date, and the first question they asked was, what does he do? So I thought it's an interesting question because I know that if we were a guy, we'd go, what's she look like, or what's she like, or is she funny, is she this, is she that? We'd ask questions about the person, but that's not what happens in a lot of conversations I've seen. Now I'll probably get loads of trouble for that, but it's just my observation. And it comes down to it's not every woman, just like it's not every man. But there is these trends, isn't there? There are these trends. And I think like you said, in the military, you were trained to ignore your emotions, to ignore how you're feeling. And I'm sure that was really helpful in a lot of occasions. But doesn't translate to real life, does it? And that's why a lot of military people struggle when they try to come back into civilian life, because they have these set of skills that make them a superhero in the job they're doing, but they don't need them here. And it's really, really hard. And men tell them, like my client said to me, I don't want to pass along that pain. If you're having something going on in your life and it's really, really difficult, you don't want your wife and your kids to worry about it too. So I'm just going to keep it to myself, or I become really good and really well practiced at it, and then I don't tell anybody. because I've started to build this fortress around it. And now I'm starting to feel a bit guilty about it. Actually, I'm a bit ashamed of it. I shouldn't feel like this. No one else is feeling like this. Again, judging myself on the inside by someone else's outside, so it's this massive pattern. It all works together in one big synergy, and what we need to become better at is identifying our emotions. If you ask me, the most fundamental skill any person can learn is emotional regulation. Simple. And you apply that emotional regulation to absolutely anything, and it will be beneficial. I promise you. It's a real thing to try and practice, though.
Yeah, and something, again, hands up, that I still struggle with it, but it's something that I see such value, because
So do I.
it improves everything in your life. I mean, just on that note there, talk about, like, men's mental health, really, and you sort of touched on it at the beginning, I think, about did you say something about suicide at the beginning? Have I just made that up? I've written a note on suicide. I don't know why I've got that in my thing.
Oh, the barber.
The barber.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I knew I had it. I thought, God, I just made that up.
Yeah.
No, I knew I had a note on it from earlier on.
Yeah.
So, and it's something that I know 3 people, 2 from the military who committed suicide, and it's just, obviously it's a serious issue, but it's men's mental health is something that we are talking about more now, and we see. I think it's the biggest cause of death for men under 45, I believe. Is that
definitely? It's definitely the biggest, up to 35.
35, yeah. I don't get on probably people,
yeah.
But yeah. So, and you mentioned depression today as well, Johnny, and I think a lot of things that you talk about is to do with mental and emotional well-being, and I think there's men and women who can connect a lot to what you're saying. But this is probably a big question, but why do you see? I mean, you've alluded to it already, really, but why do you see sort of men's mental health becoming such a bigger issue now?
Well, it's perpetuated most of the time. It's perpetuated by alcohol. So they drink a lot, and then they're alone with their own. I know that when I drunk, I would sit, and there was not enough alcohol I could drink, and I got to a point where I didn't even really get drunk, but I would drink on my own. I wasn't out with the lads and all that. Matter of fact, when I was out with the lads, I was very under control. When people found out I had challenges around alcohol, they were all like, you don't even drink that much, And now I have to go into spaces and people go, you don't drink. And they say, why not? And I used to fumble my way through this explanation. Sometimes it get a bit out of control. I'd be like on a night out and I'll start talking about childhood trauma. And I'm like, bloody hell. They'd back away of that. But like now I just tell them, because I'm not very good at it. Just not good at drinking, so I don't do it anymore. Oh, okay. Strangely enough, people accept it. But I used to sit on my own and I used to ruminate. Depression is rumination, in my opinion. And what that is it's like if you have a wound, right? So you cut yourself, you cut your leg, big old gouge on it, and you let be what be. You don't touch it, you patch it all up, you do all the stuff, and you don't touch it, and you leave it alone, it will heal. But what some people do is they play around with it and they make it start bleeding again. It's rumination. Things happen to us and we can't stop thinking about it. We can't stop talking about it. And every time we do it, we feel all those feelings all over again. Worse still, when we think about it, we change it a little bit. We might even make it a little bit worse. And for men, because we don't talk, we become our own counsel. We ask ourselves questions and we answer them too. That's not helpful. What we need to do is we need to get into a place where, again, we can't change what happened, but we can change the perspective of it. But you've got to want to. You've got to. The best question you can ask any guy, if you really want to encourage change, is, have you had enough pain yet? Have you had enough of this? Are you sick of feeling like you do now? Because if you are, let's do something about it. And that means we've got to have a conversation, and it's going to be really difficult, and you're probably going to cry. And you're probably going to get angry, and the anger is going to be attached to some feelings that you're having. But once we start, we're not going to get anywhere until we start talking about how we feel. And there'll be plenty of people out there that will tell you that you're weak for that. I guarantee you they're going through the same stuff, but they don't like the fact that you're getting better and they're not. And that's what it comes down to. And in today, I don't know why people get depressed. It's usually some form of neglect. Like I said, that depression comes from neglecting yourself and your needs. Probably some element of comparison, and it's also just not a lack of acknowledgement. There are 4, in my opinion, again, one of my little quirks, but I believe there are 4 stages to behavioral change. The first has to be awareness. You have to know what the problem is. You have to get absolute clarity on it, which means there needs to be some honesty. You might not. One of the things that people struggle with is we struggle with things we don't want to be true. I feel this way and I don't want to feel this way, so I'm just going to pretend I don't. But you do. But you do. And you're telling yourself you don't, but you do. And you see someone in denial. It's painful to watch. It's hard to watch. You know, everyone else knows, they don't know. It's hard. It's really hard. So awareness is the first thing. Once you're aware of the problem, the next bit is accountability. What do you have influence over here? What can you do? What can you change? What can you take accountability for in this? It's not always easy. Now, accountability is not blame. You're not taking a blame for something. You're just taking accountability for your part in it, which is fair. The next part is acceptance. The bits that you can't do anything about, just accept it and let it go. Now, I make that sound really easy and it isn't, but you do have to do it still, so you've got awareness, you've got accountability, and you've got acceptance. And then the last one is, if you really want change, you can't do it without one thing: action. You have to do something. You can't not do anything. That's not going to happen. There's no one else can do it for you. And you might notice that they conveniently all start with A. So I call it the 4 A's, the 4 A's of behavioral change: awareness, accountability, acceptance, and action. Yeah. And the reason I bring that up is because what we were talking about earlier, how do you know you're moving in the right direction unless there's markers? If you can say to yourself, I'm aware of the problem, you've started the journey. If you can say to yourself, I've taken accountability for this, you've moved through the journey. If you know that you've accepted, you're moving a bit further. And if you've taken action, you're there. You've achieved your goal. Your change is happening. It's happened, And that's why I try to put that in there, because I try to give people cues. If you and I decide we're going to go to Scotland, right? At some point, we're going to want to see a sign for Scotland. We think we're going in the wrong way, So
mate, we're not there. Two Southerners, mate. We're not going up there. Get
that way. Go that way.
Scotland, where's that?
Yeah, but we want signs, don't we? We want indications that we're moving in the right direction, because it creates motivation. It's that we're going in the right direction. We're getting what we want. We're moving there. Keep going. You're doing well, And that's what that is. That's why I sort of push that over to clients. You're aware of the problem. You're taking accountability for this. You've accepted that, and you've done these actions. You're doing it. You're doing well. Well done. But we're not good at that, are we? Especially blokes. What's next? What's next? And that's a great growth mindset, but it can also be to a detriment, because we never stop and take stock of what we've done. I think one of you said it earlier, you're not recognizing the things that you've achieved. Then how do you use that as evidence to fight that imposter syndrome later? And I've got loads of thoughts on imposter syndrome. I think imposter syndrome is like DOMS, It's like you go to the gym, right? And you push yourself out of your comfort zone, yeah? So you go to the gym, you lift a bit more weight, you might decrease your rest breaks, you might increase your reps a little bit, whatever you do to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And then the next day you have an uncomfortable feeling. All DOMS, especially if you've done legs. Yeah. But what is that? That's imposter syndrome. When a client comes to me with imposter syndrome, and I've been really lucky, I've worked with some really successful business people, right? And I think first and foremost, every single one of them has had imposter syndrome. Fantastic. That must be a sign of success then. So if you have imposter syndrome, congratulations, you're doing something right. You're doing something right. It's good. You don't see someone who doesn't care about stuff, someone that's not doing well in life, have imposter syndrome because they don't care about it. Yeah. And the other part of it is that people think that they're petrified, but they're not. They're just passionate. This thing that you want to do means so much to you that occasionally you feel like an imposter. It's your passion. You're passionate about it. It means a lot to you. Therefore, it's easy to mistake that for being scared, because if something means something to us and it gets taken away, it's going to hurt. That's a scary thought. The other part of it is you might have fitness icons, right? And then one day your podcast becomes so successful that you're standing in a room with these fitness icons that you really respect. That's enough to make anyone feel like an imposter. You've been listening to this guy for 10 years on his podcast and he's standing there. That's mental. Doesn't mean you're not as good as him, though. Yeah. Just means that it's a bit scary. That's all right. So there's loads of things around imposter syndrome, but I tell you what it isn't. It's not that you're an imposter. It isn't that, but most of these things that we experience that hold us back, they all circumnavigate one word, in my opinion, and that's fear. It's just scared, right? Don't like to admit it when we're scared, but we're scared. Imposter syndrome is fear. And someone just gave it a pretty name. It's just fear, and it's okay to be scared, because what did I say to earlier is that you can't be brave without first feeling fear.
Yeah.
So just be brave. There's your antidote.
A lot of the people that listen to our podcast are personal trainers and coaches. And I wanted to come back to something that you alluded to right at the start with barbers, hairdressers, personal trainers, how a lot of clients do open up about things. And, I have a lot of clients over the years said, you know more than my friends, you know more than my family, or it's more than I open up normally. And both men and women have said that to me over the years. I'm sure it must be the same for you. And I know when I've spoken to my barber about it as well. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on to why that is. Why do people maybe feel more comfortable? Because you're separated maybe from their life. I've always thought you're not involved in their friends and family group. It's always been interesting to me why people feel maybe comfortable opening up a little bit more with that person than they would maybe people that are closer to them.
I don't know, but I know that in some cases, especially that personal trainer relationship, it might be the only situation in their life where the only reason that you're with this person is to improve yourself.
Right.
And this is the only person, granted they're paid, but they care and they're listening.
Yeah.
Because I've got a lot of mates that will go, "How are you, Johnny?" Then just crack on talking. I don't care. I don't care how I am. I don't even answer. I don't even bother anymore. It's just like, yeah. Okay. I don't care. This is normal people. It doesn't make people bad or good. It's just how people are. People want to talk about themselves most of the time. I've now nailed the art of networking. I walk into a room, I learn everything about everybody else, and I walk out. I don't tell anyone anything because they don't care. So I don't offer it. I just sit and I listen. What do you do? Oh, and then they talk about themselves for 15 minutes. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's good. It just is what it is, So I think the reason why those relationships are important is that when you sit in that barber chair, you're sat in a chair for 30 minutes. That might be the only time in your day where you sit and do nothing. All the other parts of your days are taken up with work, taken up with your kids, your partner, your whatever, And even later, when you're sat there, you're watching telly, right? Or you're listening to a podcast, you're doing something. You're sat in a barber's chair, you're not doing anything. So it might be the only time in your day where you actually stop to think for a second, and then stuff comes out. And if your barber's a bit nosy, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about stuff and you're like, why am I telling him this? And it's like that. It's like when people have conversations in tents and they think that there are walls there. It's like, no, we can all hear you. You're in a barber's chair and it's like, there's loads of people around, but you're telling them stuff that you've not told anybody. You're like, why am I doing this? It's bad.
Yeah.
It's the same with being in a pub, barman,
Yeah.
You're giving someone that space, isn't it? And that time and that. And we talked about active listening earlier. Like, it's the power in that. People go, actually, someone really is like fully listening. This is about me now and what's going on in my life. And unless someone has therapy or in those environments, often they don't really get an opportunity for that because they're quite busy. Who actually spends time to really pay attention? And like you mentioned, how fine-tuned you are now, Johnny, with kind of like how you're hearing, not just what people are saying, but how they're saying it, the pauses they put, what you pick up on. That's incredibly powerful for the client, but also very unique. And it's an opportunity for people to tap into not just what's going on consciously, but sometimes subconsciously. And they're thinking, oh, and I wasn't even aware of this is how I felt because I've suppressed this feeling or suppressed these thoughts for so long. I've now been given an opportunity in a safe space to explore this. And us as personal trainers, of course, we're not trying to be therapists, but a byproduct of caring and giving someone space and actively listening to someone tends to be some of the stuff you get back can be really powerful and sometimes quite emotional as well.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone should undervalue it. Like, PTs do not get enough credit for the skills they develop when it comes to active listening, because they do it so much. They learn how to listen, they learn how to interpret, they learn how to give feedback, they learn how to do all of that stuff. They got no choice because they're being told things that are hard to hear sometimes. This might get a bit deep, but like sometimes you come to somebody, someone comes to you even, and they've experienced a miscarriage or they've experienced cancer recovery. or they've experienced sexual assault. That's happened to them. There's nothing you can do about it. There's not time to go out and get training on it. You've got to learn how to respond to that, and that person might get emotional and tell you stuff. And that's probably part of the problem. That's probably why they've become overweight, because this thing that's causing them, they're telling you what the problem is. Your client will tell you what's going on. Whether you choose to listen or not is up to you. But they're telling you all the time. It's part of this value thing, isn't it? You're listening all the time. You're listening and going, that sounds important. That sounds important. That person sat in the night drinking a bottle of wine every night, because when they sit down, when it all goes quiet, single mum with 2 kids are in bed, they can't stand it. It's too quiet. I need to do something. I need to get away from this horrible feeling I'm having. But what they're not realizing is that wine is 1,000 calories or something. Do that for a little while. I think I read once that it takes a 70-calorie biscuit a day to gain, I think it's like 6 stone or something over 10 years. I can't remember what it was, something like that. But it was just like 70-calorie biscuit. Damn, that's not a lot, but it's not a lot if you think about it over time, as your metabolism slows down as you get older and you're smashing the biscuits. And let's face it, who's eating 1 biscuit? I've never done that in my life.
No, one packet, maybe, mate.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't take a lot. I mean, one of the hard and really difficult to accept things is that it really doesn't, that the human beings don't really need a lot of food to survive. We don't really, when we actually stop and we work it out, we don't need a lot of food. But, and you pack in the fact that, food has increased. So when I was a kid, there was 30 gram packets of crisps. Now they're 50, 55, so food's getting more and things like that. And then you go to somewhere like McDonald's and, 500 calories for the fries, 500 calories for the Big Mac. And then you put the drink on there as well, and maybe a McFlurry, and you've got your daily allowance all in one meal. So that battle that person's having, they already don't stand a chance. It's hard. They've got to make real disciplined things in a world where no one else is doing it. It's difficult. That's really difficult.
I want to just draw us back to that emotional piece again. You're passionate about it, but I just think with self-development, part of that clearly is understanding a bit more about yourself and your own emotions. And I personally feel the better I've got at that, the better I've got with handling other people's emotions. So when other people are emotional, there's going to be a reaction in me. And the better I've got understanding my own reactions and emotions, the better I've got at understanding others, because we're responsible for our souls and how we cope and manage with our emotions. I'm not responsible for other people's emotions, but I'm responsible for how I respond and react to them. I don't think it's something that you can relate to, but something that I've noticed as I've got older and as a trainer, when people are getting emotional, whether it's angry, whether it's upset, I seem to have women in tears often. It's probably the effect that I'll have on them. Not another session, James, please. But on a serious note, it's a privilege in some ways, to be fair, Johnny. Actually, it's a privilege that people can share their emotions with me, and if they do get upset, I definitely see it as a compliment, actually. But the more I've learned about myself and my own emotions, I've been able to cope with other people's emotions better. I don't know if you can relate to that one.
Yeah, I mean, what I've learned is that once you start to understand emotions, it increases your capacity for empathy. So you are able to empathize with many more situations. For example, when I was a young trainer, like 1 or 2 years out, and I'd have somebody come in who was a mum who's got a young child, and they'd come in and they'd say, "Oh, I'm really tired today." And I'd go, "Oh, well," and I wouldn't change a single thing about the workout. I'd just go, "Okay, cool. Well, you'll be fine. Let's go." Because I didn't have any understanding of what it was like to have children. So then when I had kids and they'd come in and they'd say the same thing, like, "Oh, what happened?" They say, "Oh, colic, is it colic? Is it reflux? Is it this? Is it that?" And I'd have an understanding of it. And then I would adapt things, and the workout would be minimal, because I can tell you something that lady doesn't need is that's leg DOMs. She doesn't need to be doing a 3 o'clock feed with like legs that don't work. But the other part of it as well is like, I learned this about addiction. I help people recover from alcohol addiction and all sorts of addictions. And what I had to learn was, yes, I have experience of it. I do. I have real lived experience of genuine, really difficult addiction. But that doesn't mean that the solution is the same for that person. I can understand how it feels, but that doesn't mean just because I've had it that I know what you should do, because the route will be different. And that's the thing that I think, if I was going to talk exclusively to the coaches, to the PTs, I can say something with absolute certainty. And that is that if you want to know how to fix your client, listen, because they will tell you. You do not know the answer. Don't think you know what's best for your client, because you don't. Because your value system and belief system that develops and creates the foundation of who you are is completely different to them. You try and apply that to their life, it won't work, because all you're doing is creating further disalignment. So listen to your client, let them tell you, because they will tell you if you can hear it. And it's a skill that needs to be developed over time. It takes a long time to hear those cues. But as you get better at it, as you start to nurture that skill in yourself, you will become so good at it. And that will be the missing link that will help you help that person. Keep reflecting back to them what they're telling you, but try and do it in a more helpful way. Don't tell them, oh, you go out and get pissed all the time, because that's what you told me. Like, try and do it in a bit more of a helpful way, maybe.
It's so powerful, that, Johnny, and it's funny you say that, because we've had a few conversations on the podcast around personal trainers passing on their own judgments and perceptions and values onto their clients. And yeah, how do we know what's right for that person? It is about understanding that individual in front of you, and that takes time, that takes energy, it takes listening, thinking about emotions, more empathic listening to really put yourself in their shoes, how they must be feeling. It's bloody hard work, but very rewarding, satisfying when you can get there with it, and something that I have a bias towards and I'm very passionate about, hence why I wanted you to come on the podcast today. It's yeah, it's just I love listening to you, because you kind of sing off the same sort of song sheet as I think of both me and Dan, really, which is always great when you get people similar biases to off Dan, isn't it, mate?
Does get your own confirmation bias in.
Yeah.
That's what I love more than anything.
Yeah.
But it is, because it's just been really interesting listening to you talk today, Johnny. You speak so well, and actually it's just been thoroughly enjoyable, because I've never made so many notes. You made a thing to it, and when you were first talking, Johnny, there was so much quality information in there that I wanted to pull out and ask you. And to be fair, I'm going like halfway through it.
We could easily do another podcast, mate. I mean, I know you mentioned about kind of what you're doing a little bit at the beginning. Could you sort of share a little bit about your Super Self program a little bit for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, the Super Self program came in around the lockdown. It was all part of that time I told you about, where I wasn't able to work with clients one-to-one. So what was interesting is when you take the exercise element out of it, even though that movement part of it is so important to self-development, people unlock things within themselves unknowingly just through movement. They experience certain feelings and certain emotions because they're moving, right? But when that wasn't that, and they were comfortable, the information was different. And there was this pressure to have conversations and to talk. So I would say, like, oh, how's your week been? And I'd say, yeah, it's all right. Straight away, I've heard something. What's that then? What happened? Oh, it's just this and that. I never noticed it before, but now I'm not working and all that. I've really noticed it. Oh, cool. Talk about it. Tell me about it. And this might be the first time they've explored it, right? Learning, and they're listening to themselves and they go, I didn't realize I felt like that about it, But anyway, over time, I started collecting all this stuff, and I started noticing all these similarities and all these things that made sense. And I started realizing that a lot of the stuff came down to values. And then a lot of the stuff came down to a lack of purpose, or because purpose was taken away from us, right? We didn't have our day-to-day job. So I started realizing the impact of purpose, how important it is to have some reason to get out of bed. I have people talking to me and they're in their pajamas still. Sometimes I was in my pajamas still. I just had a t-shirt on, but down here I was living in pajama land, But I learned about, values, purpose, limiting beliefs, motivation, the importance of our environment, how important our environment is. All of our environments changed overnight. Yeah. But environments isn't dictated by just that building you're in. It's dictated by the people, places, and the things in your life. All of a sudden, you just learn and you don't like your husband anymore. He's there all the time. I don't like this guy. Why am I with him? And this is it. This is what happened. Truthfully, there's lots of, I don't know this, but I'd imagine the divorce rate soared during lockdown. I can imagine it did. What I do know is that I started the podcast during lockdown, and I found out that domestic violence increased by 400%. That's obscene. It's outrageous. That's what happened during lockdown. So lots of things came to the surface, stuff that people were able to push down into the stuff sack, but they can't do that anymore. So I learned all this stuff and I started putting it together. And then I offered to a couple of clients. I said, listen, I've created this program and I want to see whether I'm onto something or not. Do you mind if I do it for you for free? And I put a bunch of my clients through the Supercell program during lockdown. And the results were unbelievable. I couldn't believe I couldn't believe, first of all, that I had anything to do with it. I thought, what the hell is going on? This is nuts. Can't believe the stuff I'm finding out. And again, it comes down to that point where nobody walks up to you with the answer to a question you don't ask. I was asking questions that they'd never been asked before. So therefore, they're never going to have the answer. So they were discovering things about themselves, and I started putting it into a journey. We start with values, then we go on to purpose, because our values inform our purpose. And then I realized that once you know your purpose, you don't want to do it because you've got limiting beliefs. So the limiting beliefs need to be addressed. And then you've got rid of your limiting beliefs, you know your purpose, you know your values, but I'm not feeling motivated. That's because you don't understand what motivation is. Motivation is your reason why you're doing it, you know? And then it went on and on and on and on. And I'd created this program, and don't think I'll get emotional saying this, but I'll try. But there's a lady here in Cornwall, and during lockdown, her daughter committed suicide. Now, if you've got kids, you'll know that's the worst thing you can ever hear, isn't it? And what she did with that pain was she started a charity called George's Voice, and she now helps young girls that are suicidal. I don't even know where to begin with that level of strength. About 2 years after it happened, she said to me, I want to do your Supercell program. Telling the truth, I freaked out. I was like, how the hell am I going to help this person? They've lost their daughter. You've got to be kidding me. And she insisted on us having a call, and I'd got to know her a little bit because I'd done a bit of sort of work with her and other things. And the more time we spent together, the more she started to feel like I could help her. So we're having a conversation, and I'd almost but decided that I'm not sure I can do anything for you, but I do know somebody that might be able to help. And then she said this, I'm just sick of being sad and I want to be excited about my future. Now, there's something I've learned about myself, and that is I can help you move forward. I can help you with that. We're now making a documentary about it. And the other day I watched some of the extracts of the documentary, and there was some seriously powerful stuff in it. Because I can't believe the change in this woman. She's actually excited about her life. She's first of all, she's an incredible person, and I learned a great deal from her, believe me. But this woman that lost her daughter is excited about her future. That's amazing, you know. So now it took me a while because I'm not a salesman, and you know the media bros, right? So they probably told you that I'm a nightmare about stuff I give away for free and do so. I remember they would put me on chemistry calls, and then I'd get on the phone with Jack and he'd go, done it again, Johnny. You've solved a problem in the chemistry call. She doesn't need you now. Stop doing that. I can't help it. If I see someone that needs help and I feel like I can help and it's a simple thing, I don't want to take your money, but that's not good business. You know, but the program, what I ended up doing was the sessions were always very similar. The questions were always very similar. So what I do now is that people can buy the program online, and it's eight weeks. And there's a deliberate reason why each week you have to wait 5 days before you can do the next module, because people, when you ask someone a question, they feel compelled to give you an answer, but it might not be the right answer. But once you've asked a question, their mind is actively looking for the answer. And 3 or 4 days afterwards, they might come up with the actual answer, you know? So it's time. It's the one thing we can't control. So they have that time to mull it over. And like I said, every week they turn up, they're a different person, because in between those sessions that they do online, they have worksheets to fill out and they have work to do. That's for them. You know, they answer questions, and the more time they spend in it, the better results they get. But then at some point they get to talk to me each week, and I sit there and I listen to all of the stuff they've discovered about themselves, and I just tweak it a little bit, because they still got these old habits, right? They always want to look on the dark side of life. They always want to be horrible to themselves. So I just question, how true is that? How true is that? And we might even get to a point where they don't know what to do, because one of the reasons that people don't know what to do, one of the reasons they can't make decisions is because they don't understand their value system well enough. So that's difficult for them to make decisions, but they understand. Here's a story, right? The other day, my son woke up on a Sunday, and every Sunday my favorite part of the week is watching him play rugby. So we go and we watch rugby on Sunday. But one Sunday he woke up. Well, no, he didn't wake up. He was just lying in bed. And I was like, uh-oh. He's usually bounced out of bed, jumping on me, right, on a Sunday. But he's not. So I went in and I said, "You're right, babe." And he's just like, "I'm not sure." He was all ill. And I was just like, "What's going on?" He's like, "Oh, I feel terrible, Dad. I feel really ill." I was like, "Okay." I said, "So we're not going rugby today?" No, we're still going to go. And I'm like, "Are you sure? You don't look like you're going to be much good at rugby." And he's like, "Yeah, but my team need me and my coach will be let down." What's he doing there? He's thinking about everybody else's stuff because he knows that, he can see that, he can quantify that, he can understand it and recognize it. But what he doesn't know is how he feels. So I said to him, "What do you want to do?" "Oh, I just want to sit and watch Netflix with the fire on." Do that. But it wasn't until I asked him the question that he knew what he wanted. Up until then, he was struggling with it, So what the Supercell program does is it shines a light on that. It forces you almost to look into yourself and figure out what's happening. And I've seen people get over childhood trauma. And let me just make it clear, none of this is a guarantee. I can't say that if you've got addiction problems that the Supercell program is going to help. I'm not saying if you're grieving, the Supercell program is going to help. What I'm saying is if you're struggling to move forward, if you're stuck and you don't understand what stuck means and you're just stuck and you just can't move forward, this works. I'm even surprised it works, but it does work. And what I've noticed is this isn't a pitch, sounds like one, but like I've been working alongside a lot of PTs because this program, alongside personal training, game changer. I've never seen anything like it. This is still in development. I'm still working through this, but I'm noticing that a lot of people that do the program alongside PT, it has a big impact because what are they doing? They're addressing the root cause whilst they're working, aren't they? But then what I'm also doing is I'm going into PT communities and I'm presenting some of the sessions. So someone might say to me, "Hey, could you do a little bit of work around motivation? Could you do a bit of work around resilience?" And what these incredible trainers are doing is they're identifying common traits within their team or their group of people that they're training. And they're going, "This is something that's going on amongst all of these people. How would you like it if I got Johnny in to go and do this?" And then we do it. And quite often, and I'd imagine it would absolutely be like that with you guys, is that this is a lot of the stuff. This is a lot of stuff that you guys know, but they don't listen to you, do they? But you get someone else in and they listen to it and you're like, "I've been saying this for years," but yet they don't hear it until someone else says it. But what I also know is a lot of trainers don't care how someone learns something as long as they learn it because they're good people and they're empathetic and they care. They don't really need to get the credit for it. They just want them to be okay, And if that means that Johnny comes in and does it, that's fine, whatever. But I can guarantee you guys already know what I know. It's just they're not listening to you. Do you remember Charlie Brown? Do you remember when they used to listen to his parents and all he could hear was, that's what happens.
Johnny, it's been fantastic sort of talking to you today. Just the honesty, some of the reflections, the knowledge, the wisdom, everything that's come out of the conversation. I literally think me and Dan could probably carry on chatting to you for another 5 hours, but I'm wary of time. But I just want to thank you for your time and thank you for the knowledge that you've shared with our listeners today. It's been really good.
Yeah, thank you guys, man. It's been a real pleasure talking to you and getting to know you guys too, man. It's been fun. It really has, and I hope this is helpful to anyone that listens. I just that's all we can hope, isn't it?
Where can people follow you, Johnny?
Well, on Instagram at the Self-Development Coach, and same on Facebook. I've got a YouTube channel, and I'd love people to check out the podcast. Don't do it instead of these chaps. Do it as well. But that's the self-development podcast.
Johnny, bloody hell, mate.
All right. Yeah. Listen to this. That bit will be cut out.
Yeah, cut that out, mate. No, honestly, Johnny, really good chatting to you, and thank you.